And everything we've just said there on the adoption of AI and tech and not spooking the horses by jumping to the end too quickly or, being too tomorrow's world. Think about your audience, bring them along for the journey, show you're working out and just explain to people the incremental steps that will ultimately, when you step back, it will lead to something enormous, but it can't feel like a leap in real time. It has to feel like an iterative step. There is something about looking at other disciplines and trying to apply that back to our world and think about how that might work. I think that's a really, really powerful one. Make sure that you test along the way and that you bring people along for those developmental stages. Hello and welcome to what I'm reliably informed is episode 96 of Construction Disrupted. And a special hello and welcome to those watching on YouTube who are enjoying my brown jumper in an orange room with a pink border around it. I'm watching the preview of this and finding it quite garish. So God bless you that are going to sit through half an hour of staring at this. Mr. Simpson, how are you this week?
Well, I must admit, I thought you were blending in very nicely. a nice look. It's almost, I would say, it's almost Christmas lunch-esque. I think you could pull it off.
I'm prepping for a carol concert this afternoon, so it's this is my multi-purpose outfit for that exact reason.
There you go. I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Keen to get into today because I think it's surprisingly less political and, as always, a positive stint on what's going on in construction right now.
Yeah, I think we've fewer splinters in our hands this week in trying to scrape the bottom of the barrel for positive stuff. But should we dive right in with our first piece, which less newsy, I think, and more of a topic I could ramble about for a good while actually. But sad news to start with the passing of the architect Frank Gehry last week at the age of 96. We were talking about this off mic a little bit earlier. The word genius gets thrown around a bit too liberally, but it absolutely fair where he's concerned. And from what I understand of the man, his modesty would hate us even talking about him in those terms.
Yeah.
Most famous for the Bilbao Guggenheim Museum, which are kind of world renowned, and we'll talk about that and its impact and effect a little bit later. But just someone that really pushed the art form forward. And one of the things that not just to sort of recognize the passing of someone that is so important to the built environment and something that we should be recognizing. But we spoke last week about Madrid and sort of lessons that can be learned from these mega projects that can be applied going forward. So Gehry obviously known as architect and the finish of his buildings and so on, the dancing houses in Prague and so on, the Walt Disney Opera House in Los Angeles, these beautiful curved structures, but also a bit of a genius when it comes to projects. So the Guggenheim in Bilbao, a phenomenal building with a really interesting backstory in terms of what the space used to be and how it used to be used, an industrial area that was regenerated and repurposed for the arts, but the arts as a catalyst for wider urban regeneration in northern Spain, which absolutely has done that. But we spoke previously about mega projects and the failure rate of was it north of 95% that were north of budget and north on time. The Guggenheim on time in budget, which phenomenal. Taking away from the finish achieved and the effects that it's had, but that in itself is pretty remarkable given what happens within the rest of that particular category.
And I must say, it sounds like he was a planner. So I like anyone that plans to the nth degree, just like we do for this podcast.
Yeah, well, tongue firmly planted in cheek there. I think our 5 minute lately is about as organised as we've ever been.
Sorry,
but no,
I digress.
A planner, absolutely. I think I have friends that work in architecture, and one of the big misnomers and the things that really upsets them is people think that it's just flight of fancy and you'll follow your muse and see where you end up. Of course, there are elements of that. Gehry himself, sorry, I sound like he's unofficial biographer here, but just someone that I've been fascinated by for a while. He was on an episode of The Simpsons years back when Springfield needed a new opera house and regretted it and hated that he was in that because they'd made basically a joke. He'd been invited and been sent a letter from the organising committee to design this particular opera house. Screwed it up in a ball, threw it on the floor, and then went, "Oh, Gehry, you're a genius." The implication being that that's all it takes to design one of these flowing fluid buildings that he's famous for. And to your point on planning, the complete opposite. The Guggenheim. We spoke about this a little bit actually with the Nobu Towers going up in Manchester. He
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things he's famous for, well, there's two parts, is modeling. So he for the Guggenheim, there was 5 large scale models in various sort of iterative states, and over 100 different constituent component part models that he developed, and that's what his studio is famous for. Is this kind of test and iterate and using modeling to kind of demonstrate how the thing is going to work in the end, which I get for construction and for marketing even, I think
Mm,
is a really important lesson. It's something we're doing with clients at the minute where budgets are tight, is to try something on a local level, try something in a couple of channels, see what works, see what messaging lands, etc., and then scale up from there. Where budgets maybe don't
nice.
allow for you to go big bang out of the gate in one step. So yeah, the planning thing is huge. And something that I'm sure we've not touched AI yet, have we? I'm sure we'll get onto it later in the episode, because why not?
Some point, yeah.
Um, but he was, again, another thing famous for was he took a piece of software designed for the aviation industry. So if you think of the aerodynamics involved in that, and
Yeah.
obviously computer design, it was a fairly new thing in architecture at the time. But that's the reason he was able to achieve these kind of curved curtain walls and curved facades was literally through aerodynamic design. So yeah, a completely fascinating guy. But I thought again, worth recognizing anyway in his own right. But yeah, quite interesting to tie that back to what we discussed previously on mega projects last week, and some of the lessons there.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say I don't know much about the fella, and it's fascinating you talk about him, and in doing a bit of prep for this, and by prep I mean reading while you were talking. There's there's one sentence really, and I think it sums him up quite nicely, and it says, the architect who once wrapped a cheap timber house in chain link and corrugated metal would end up providing the global art market and luxury brands with ever more elaborate vessels for culture and consumption. That sounds very grand, but reading in between the lines, it's pretty much what you were saying. You know, you end up with this piece, this building, this piece of artwork, if you like, that if you are to look at it from the outside looking in, it's like, yeah, literally screw up a piece of paper, throw it on the floor, and don't need that. We just have a curve here and a wrap there and bend that over. But it's not like that. This is a chap that knew what he was doing and planned it and envisioned it and worked out how that could become a reality. And that's you that exemplary in any kind of field, that planning, and then to see something come to reality that isn't just, a 2 by 2, 4 by 4, whatever square or
Yeah,
lot.
not
Fascinating.
100%. And you're someone that is known for these almost alien-like things that just are completely mind-blowing. One of the his most famous pieces is what it was the Google offices. I think it's now Chiat Day's offices in LA, but that look like a pair of binoculars. Just phenomenal creative. But as we say, the test and iteration and planning that's gone into that, and the sort of
Mm,
computer-aided design that's gone into it is we should all be learning lessons from, regardless of what we do in our day jobs. I think one of the big things that I wanted to leave the piece on as well is the regeneration, the urban. I think it's a bad rap, but the urban regeneration that lives as a result of these buildings. The Bilbao effect was a phrase that was coined off the back of the Guggenheim Museum acting as a kind of focal point for broader regeneration. So not cheap to develop one of these things. I think the initial investment into the
mhm,
Guggenheim was 126.5 million euros. Again, Bilbao, northern port town in the Basque region, that was falling into some pretty hard times during the 90s. The payback happened within a couple of years. And I'm looking at the stats here, that there's something like 3.5 billion euros of added revenue as return on investment that have been generated to the Basque region since. So, we've spoken about other urban regeneration projects, whether that's Canary Wharf, Albert Dock at Liverpool. Yet that's been a focal point for more investment and more regeneration in. But in and of itself, does it serve the community of the Merseyside region and so on? I think you have to say that the Guggenheim in particular has been an absolute home run.
mm,
It's a beautiful building in and of itself. It's innovative in and of itself, but what it's done for Bilbao and the wider Basque region economically yeah, it's proof that this stuff can and should be valued by the communities in which it exists. So yeah, incredible guy and a sad loss. But yeah, there's lots of lessons within his legacy that we should be taking on board within construction and marketing.
For sure, and that links really nicely to what we were saying last week, about learning from Madrid and things like that, and the payoff. And we were looking last week at bit of tongue in cheek, 50% off our road and rail infrastructure projects, and learning
Ooh.
from other European cities and other European organizations that have built these things and has been cheaper and on time and things like that. And with it came that simplification. And I think we can get drawn into this. If it's going to be cheaper, it has to be bland, it has to be dumbed down, scaled back to make it cheaper. And if you have got that payoff and that ROI and you do understand what you're doing, which he clearly understood what he was doing, then it doesn't have to be that dry, dull, boring approach. You can be quite innovative and still hit budget or come under budget with these things,
Well, and
which is
I think
fantastic.
completely, and I think either better to have those discussions and to test things out at the planning stage before you actually start to, make holes in the ground and start. There's the Sydney Opera House is the complete opposite of the Guggenheim in that respect. In the backstory on that is just incredible. In a rush to build and a rush to sort of show progress, and then things being dynamited and cleared away in order to start again, and the architect being in shame and living in infamy and having to escape the country. And yeah, the complete antithesis of what we're discussing here. But yeah, I think that's one of the big lessons is get your planning right, and that's where you do
Yeah.
your fun stuff and sort of test and see what works, and in order to make the on-site stuff as straightforward as possible.
Oh,
So yeah.
you're a box of knowledge today. Fantastic.
Oh, and well, that's me done now. I'm a cue on the rack.
Yeah. 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 Are you off now?
Well, I'm going to
Uh,
lead you. So we moved from the coast of northern Spain to the coast of the northwest of England, from Bilbao to Blackpool.
yeah.
Yeah, so again, it links in with stuff we discussed previously, but yeah, some serious investment going on in that part of the world.
Yeah, there is, and when I read this, I couldn't quite work out what was going on. So it was Blackpool seeks contractors to join £200 million Northwest Highways and Civils framework, and you probably know more about the intricacies of these things, but it essentially Blackpool Council leading the way and opening a tender for a highway framework across the Northwest over a 4-year period. And it's kind of it's in two phases. But when you first read it, you think, oh, it's just in Blackpool. But from what I understand, it's the whole of the Northwest, including Merseyside, Greater Manchester, Lancashire, etc., etc. And there's kind of two stages or two scopes to it. So you've got the highway surfacing, and then you've got the civil engineering part of it. And I wouldn't say it's 50-50 split in terms of the value, but the highway surfacing 120 million, and they're looking for up to 8 suppliers, 4 and 4 for both scopes. And the reason that it's made the headlines for us here is I think it's just a really positive look at, okay, we want to better the infrastructure, we want to better the roads and the networks, and we're going to open this tender, but we're not just focusing on our little area. We want it for the Northwest. So how can we do that? Um, and they're looking for people to tender, as you would. Obviously, that's a no-brainer. But the fact that it's made the news and now we're talking about it, it shows that for me, we don't emphasize these things enough, and it doesn't get enough light that there are really good projects going on, particularly in the Northwest. It might not be as elaborate as the other ones we've covered previously, in London. I think it was the last episode, where that's going to take decades to achieve, and this is more road and civils infrastructure and civils than it is housing developments and other things that will get more headlines because you can see them building up. And this is probably just going to cause congestion and chaos. But I just love the fact that Blackpool Council have led this tender for the Northwest. It's
Well,
it's exciting.
completely. It's funny whenever we've had clients that work in the civil space, etc. It's you're not the star of the show. Or you maybe if there's a big new flyover or whatever else the case may be, that this oohs and ahs for local people that, as you say, have lived with chaos while the thing's been being built, and you only notice it when it doesn't work. It's designed to be
Yeah.
forgotten about to a certain extent. So absolutely not as glamorous as several of the other projects that we've discussed. Certainly not as glamorous as the Guggenheim and the previous item that we've discussed. But hugely important. Again, if you think of Blackpool, coastal town, it's a destination. You are not traveling through Blackpool to get to the next place. So
Mm.
recognition from the council that investment needs to go into making it as easy as possible to access rather than just investing in the town itself. I think he's shrewd. I really like 200 million. Sounds like an enormous sum of money. And any full disclosure, it would be if someone offered me 200 million, by the way. But in the context of the scale of works that we're talking about here, one of the things that I love, well, it's twofold. It feels tailor made for SME contractors in the region. This doesn't
Yeah.
feel like a one big national contractor to come and hoover up all of this work and then subby it out. It feels like the way that the tender is worded and the way that the press around it has been worded feels like it's ready made for some of our smaller, sounds patronising, but some of our regional contractors to take a run at this, which is lovely. Um, and again, to your point, that continues in the comms as well. This idea that we want people from the local, not just our region on Blackpool and the Fylde Coast, but around the northwest. It feels very. I'm sure they would look at applications from people elsewhere. But yeah, no, it absolutely feels like it's geared up for that, which I think is hugely important. We've spoken about it before in the context of labour and making sure that there are employment opportunities for people in their local market, and I just think it ticks a lot of boxes in that respect. It's yeah, as you say, the kind of projects that don't typically make the headlines and get a lot of spotlight shone on them, but crucially important to make sure that our part of the economy is moving. Pardon the pun.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and it's, to put it into 2 lots, it's pretty comprehensive what they're covering, and I think, Blackpool Council quite canny in a way, in like you said, no one's going there unless they're going there, so how can we get them there easier? Um, and yeah, I just like the idea of councils working together and keeping it as local as possible for contractors and people working on these things. Um, so yeah, I think keep your eyes on this one, and I'll be interested to see who does end up doing this work. I know a few local organisations that would be absolutely primed for asphalt and markings and drainage and lighting and things like that. So yeah, I'll be keeping a keen eye on that one.
Well, there's two points there that I think are crucial, to be honest, Pete. I think keep your eyes on it is a really, really good one. These things, and this is my kind of my 2 points in one here. They have a value in and of themselves. So if people can get to Blackpool more easily and spend their leisure time there and add to the local economy, then Blackpool Council aren't doing this out of the goodness of their hearts.
Yeah.
They're going to see some sort of economic return on this, and rightly so. So that's one part of it. Is what else happens in and around this investment? Do house builders now decide that this is a more attractive area as a result, etc., and that transport links
Mhm.
improve and so on. So yeah, it's not just this in and of itself. It's what are the other regenerative effects that happen around it. And again, it's not the happiest of news, but jumping back to the ONS data that we discussed last week and the S&P index and some of the unhappier stats within the wider economy. One of the things that stuck out was that the private housing, for example, down, but social housing up. We need local authorities at the minute, while central government are funding them, better than has been the case in recent history for this kind of work. We've spoken about the infrastructure pipeline being at 725 billion in total. It needs good local authorities to act as good clients in these instances until the private market starts to hit value and move. And I think again, we spoke about lessons being learned from the Frank Gehry piece for all of us in
Mm.
industry. I think for other local authorities and other parts of central government at the minute, um, yeah, there's a lot to like about the approach here. And I think if that can be replicated elsewhere, then, as I say, until the private part of the market starts to move, we'd be in a much healthier position if other local authorities stepped up in this way.
Yeah, for sure. Completely agree. So onwards then. Let's move on to the third and final. Uh, um, we're looking at 2026. What's going on here?
Had to happen at some point. It feels, I don't know, it still feels a long way away given how busy we all are, but, yeah, it's people reliably inform me it's around the corner, but, it
Well,
must be.
that's all you've heard for about 3 months, isn't it? It's around
No,
the corner.
no. But no, we're starting to get to that point of the year where people are publishing, predictive articles and sort of lists of the year, and again, we're not immune to that, are we? That might be something
Mhm.
that's in our immediate future on this particular podcast,
No.
but yeah, I'll give you the credit. You found a really interesting article on, sort of predictive trends for the construction sector going into 26. I don't know if you want to intro this one.
Yeah, for sure. So it does what it says on the tin, really. It's a look at what the construction industry, with a slight twist, looking at contractors. I feel, um, what we should be looking at in 2026, what will shape the industry. Got to admit, it has got a slight twist in terms of looking at the tech, but I suppose that's because of the author and the organisation that was part of writing this. So it's quite technology heavy. But having said that, I think that would be unavoidable. Personally, I think he hasn't used AI enough. Um, I think, yeah, you can't get away from looking at next year or the future without mentioning AI or something of that ilk. They do mention it, obviously, and that's first and foremost. But I just think it's a really good piece to have a look at what will be important next year. And from my perspective, it's a bit like in marketing. It's like, what's the latest trend in marketing? What should we be looking at 2026 in marketing? It's your same old things, really. Your diagnosis, your strategy, and your tactics and your 4Ps, and
Yeah.
that ain't gonna change. And it's similar with this, but from a construction perspective.
What completely agree. I mean, the leaps are very, very rarely as radical as, people would have you believe at the start, and I'm with you. That's one of the things that I liked about this is that, it feels iterative. So obviously AI gets a mention, but, it's not in a tomorrow's world kind of a sense. It's
Mhm,
it becomes a standard layer within planning and workflows. So again, it's not that down tool, stop what you're doing, and you need to become an expert in this. We've spoken about it before with, some of the investments that the main contractors are making just in taking the way that they work currently and applying an AI layer to sort of simplify some processes. We've said before we think that that's exactly right, but seeing this now applied on site, if you like, that a lot of the, workflow planning, labor and resource planning, and so on is going to become programmatic. It makes
mhm,
absolute sense. And again, holding it up as, a means of solving some practical problems. One of the things that I've been reading in recent weeks is a lot of the consultants starting to apply a bit of pressure to their clients to say that if things are moving now through Gateway 2, now is the time for you to push the button. I know you want to wait for land to hit value, but pretty soon you're going to run into labor shortages, material costs are likely to rise, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have the means to start to move your project, then do so. And they note this in the article, that your material costs are likely to rise. And therefore, just in time deliveries are going to become even more important. They talk about things like material theft on site, for example. You
mhm,
don't want your materials lying around for an inordinate amount of time when you don't need them to. And therefore, again, AI within planning software, at what point do I need this? And therefore, where can I order it from? And so on. I think that this whole supply chain is ripe for some modernization in that respect. We still tend to do things in the way that we have for a long time. So again, they're not radical leaps. It's not a seismic overnight shift that should scare people. But yeah, what are the practical challenges that we face, and is there a simple way that technology can help to aid that? And I think that was a really, really good example of that.
yeah, for sure. I mean, they finished the piece with what's to come next for construction teams, and it's like you said, it's utilizing this technology in in ways that it's never. I'm struggling not to say revolutionary because potentially it could be, but I just think it's small steps. So they mention things like um, sensors and drones and robots and that kind of stuff. And it's not far from the future, but when you say those things, people's minds go towards robots building a whole project by themselves and taking over and taking control, and we're nowhere near that. It's not about that. It's about your organization, your construction organization, or I'm going to put this from a wider built environment perspective. Anyone that works in our industry, it's looking at the technology, and we've said it on numerous previous episodes, and okay, how can we make our lives easier using technology, and what technology do we need, rather than there's this piece of technology, how do we squeeze it in? And this piece doesn't do that, but it highlights those areas where we can improve from a cost perspective, operating slightly leaner, um, the equipment we utilize on site and efficiencies there, and even from the point of view of logging in, logging out in terms of
Mm.
sites, and even in offices, and how we communicate to sites and how we communicate what's going on from a project management perspective. All those types of things, nearly everything within the built environment, that there is technology out there right now that can make things easier, more efficient, and quicker. You need that little piece of skill to utilize that, and AI is helping diminish the bar of knowledge you need to implement those things. But the payoff and the return is far quicker than it will ever be
I
right
was going to say,
now.
I think you raised two really, really important points there, Peter. That this can't, again, it can't feel such a big leap. It has to feel. We know
Yeah.
we've got profiling in really, really broad strokes here, but generally within the built environment, within construction, we have quite a high risk aversion, I would say, within us as a sector, which is no bad thing, by the way, necessarily. But I think that's true. I'll give the credit, drag it back to nerdy marketing world for a second. But System One, the advertising testing company, there is
Mhm.
a chap there called Orlando Wood, who I love his work. He was talking about when launching something new, the optimal sort of balance is 80% familiarity, 20% novelty. That anything
Mhm.
that feels too new feels scary, and it's something we talk about
Yeah.
with clients where they have new technologies to launch or new whatever to launch. And he talks a lot about when the iPhone was launched, that the way that Jobs did that with it. Obviously, Steve Jobs is an absolute master of these things.
Mm.
But it wasn't sold as this massive. It was from the iPod to the iPod Touch to we'd already got used to tactile things from Apple. And the way that he pitched that was, you're going to have a phone, an internet connected device, it's things that people are already
iPod.
familiar with. It was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was the bringing all of these things together.
Mhm.
So I think there's something in that we can't scare people with this massive leap. But to your point on kind of incremental gains, there has to be something in it for them as well. People aren't going to do
Yeah.
this just because they're tech nerds or whatever. There has to be some commercial payback to it. So yeah, I think for me this feels the right approach. It feels sensible. It feels pragmatic, and I think we'll get a lot further in taking it that way rather than sort of leaping ahead too far.
And I'm gonna finish this week's episode before we look at our takeaways in saying that this technology and new technology and organizations that are looking to implement it, absolutely bang right what you were saying there, and they can learn a lot from marketing in a way. You need that marketing. Like you were saying about Steve Jobs, he was great on stage and fantastic the way he pitched things, because he drew you in, and it was simplification, and it wasn't that this is gonna change the world, although he knew it would. It was like, okay, well, no one's gonna jump on this if I say change the world and it's really complex and there's all this stuff going on. It was like, this will simplify your life and bring everything you usually have in your pockets when you leave the door in one singular device. It's like, oh, I get that. And
Yeah,
then it snowballs. And like with all these things, it's like if you pitch it in the right way, if you position it correctly to your target audience, then you stand a much better chance of succeeding. And we've all got to remember that it's not about us; it's about the end user.
completely.
And that's sort of, it's not my takeaway this week, but I think it's a nice way to finish this news story, because AI, quickly, anecdotally, my dad was down this weekend, and one of the first questions he asked me was, "Are you using the AI?" That was the question. I went, "Dad, I honestly don't know what you just asked me."
Dabble.
Yeah. Yeah. I know a few things,
Oh, God
but
bless him. Well, yeah, I think
yeah,
everyone brace yourself for a few of those conversations around the dining room table at Christmas because it's coming.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, yeah, plus the AI.
Well, listen, I was
Uh,
gonna, I'm on pins as to what your takeaway might be because that was pretty profound prior to the dad
oh,
anecdote. So what is your
I
takeaway
know,
this week?
I think we need an interlude, and then we'll go on to takeaways. I don't know how to follow that, but, I think I'm gonna go back to, Mr. Frank, if you don't mind.
Mm,
And I think I'm going to say that you don't have to if you're looking for I'm not going to say cheap, but if you're on a budget and that is fundamentally constricting, it doesn't mean you have to make things boring or dull or reduce the quality of them. There are always ways, particularly with new technology. So it's always thinking differently. And if you're on a budget, it doesn't mean you have to be dry, dull, and boring.
yeah, no, really, really good shout. I think for me, linking the kind of first and third, I guess it applies to Blackpool as well to a certain extent. But to Gary with his test and iterate sort of approach of obviously systematically improving on his models in order to show a degree of scale, and everything we've just said there on the adoption of AI and tech and not spooking the horses by jumping to the end too quickly or being too tomorrow's world. I think about your audience, bring them along for the journey, show you're working out, and just explain to people the incremental steps that will ultimately, when you step back, it will lead to something enormous, but it can't feel like a leap in real time. It has to feel like an iterative step. And yeah, I think there is something about looking at other disciplines and trying to apply that back to our world and think about how that might work. And yeah, I think that's a really, really powerful one. Is yeah, make sure that you test along the way and that you bring people along for those developmental stages.
Yeah, absolutely. Great way to finish it this week. And next week, yeah, we might Christmas jumpers, I think, maybe.
Break out the Baileys. I think it's that time of year, isn't it? Apparently,
Bailey's with mint.
yes, quite. Always podcast responsibly.